Hello, this is Cho of the Shiny Colors Discord, and welcome to another episode of the Shiny Review. Today we're going to be talking about the latest banner for Natsuha 4, as well as the Amana featured on the banner, and the event Meguru. We also have, thanks to a rerun, a ChiuKi and Kaho to talk about. So, let's go ahead and get things started because we have 5 cards to cover today. Starting things off with Natsuha. Natsuha's 4th SSR, aesthetic aside, should look very familiar to players who've been around for a while. Her skill set and intentions are very similar to Rinzei's initial SSR, leading to an interesting question on whether or not it's better to run 2 memory gauge boosters as supports, or trade out Rinzei for Natsuha instead. A dance visual unit depending on how many extra copies you pull, though I really wish she had been vocal visual, with an incredibly interesting 2-star passive and strong enough appeals given her utility. Hiding her visual uncapped behind 4-star is a little rough, but it's workable. She's an extremely good card for when she's added to the reroll pool. Her roles are Center, Buffer, Memory Boost, and Leader. Natsuha's initial skill is a Dance 3.0 Appeal that applies a Memory Gauge boost of 10% and links into a further Memory Gauge boost of 25%. Her max skill is a Visual 4.5 that boosts her Memory Gauge by 25% and links into a further 25% Memory Gauge boost. Her 1-star passive is a Dance Visual 25% up as long as it's turn 4 or earlier, 20% chance to activate twice. Her 2-star passive is a Memory Gauge 20% up if the turn count is 3 or later, with a 20% chance to activate 5 times per run. Her 3-star uncap is a Dance Visual 100, and her 4-star uncap is a Visual 100. Her Memory Appeal, when maxed out, applies a 2-turn visual buff of 100%, and links into a Visual 3.0 Appeal. For recommended supports, we have, of course, the obvious core, but then we have other cards such as Wanderlust Mamimi, Limited Jury. We also have some other visual and dance options for you. Pack on your strongest dance and visual passives to amplify your ideal stat. Because you'll most likely be running her as center, consider the 50% bonus to passive activations. So if you have any cards that have particularly low activation chances, you might consider putting them on this Natsuha if you plan for her to be the leader of whatever team you throw her onto. As for recommended teammates, we have her visual Hokago ult first. A slight variation of the build we talked about back on the Jury 4 review. The intention is to make the most of Natsuha's visual buff off her Memory Appeal, combining Memory Gauge boosting of Rinzei and potentially Kaho 3 to stack up buffs. You can use Kaho 1 to mitigate incoming damage if you aim for more crit HP builds. And then also below we have the Memory Duo of Rinzei 1 and Natsuha 4. The Memory Duo might start making waves in support lineups, but it's a little too early to tell right now. But I do think the merit of having 2 cards that overlap, especially on visual, for Memory Gauge boosting might be really useful. So we'll just have to see. Overall, Natsuha gets an A+ as a center. I do think there is some genuine potential with this Natsuha as center, especially if you can secure the coveted critical HP range. Jury 4 is probably still better overall, but I wouldn't doubt the power of this card either. As a unit, she gets somewhere between S and S+. And for the record, if we ever have to regrade Rinzei 1, she will get the same score. Natsuha is secretly what we've been looking for in a new card, a new general support for teams that isn't Rinzei or Choco. She can offer what Rinzei 1 offers with some slight variation to accommodate for different teams. She's very good for general team building and is useful for those who might struggle with Memory Appeal timings. Next we have Amana. I'm almost upset that I predicted visual Amana last video, especially because this card came so soon. The positives of this Amana can't be understated. Visual Mastery plus Visual Stamina Mastery is an insane combination when you consider the other core visual supports like Hot Pot Mamimi. Visual teams, especially Visual Alstroemeria, now have their most core support. Her unique skills are Visual Mastery Visual and Visual Mastery Stamina, her visual skill capping out at +12 and her stamina at +7. And her TFD idea is visual. For the rest of Amana's abilities, at 1-star she unlocks a visual 30% up if you are in the visual position, 20% chance to activate once. Her 2-star passive is a visual 50% up if your team has Amana, 20% chance to activate once. Her 3-star uncapped is for visual, at 100, and her 4-star appeal is a visual 3.5 that applies a mental heal of 5%. Her support appeal is also scaling and starts at 2.6 at level 60 and works its way up to a 3.0 if you get her to level 80. Amana overall receives an S+. The visual equivalent to Tea-Time Amana with a slight emphasis towards the stamina skill over the room mastery. But there is one big difference, which is the lacking of the SP mastery. That being said, pairing her up with Hot Pot Mamimi solves the issue, much in the same way that you could pair up a Vocal Mastery vocal card with Tea Time Amana. She's an extremely good support for future re-rollers, among the best permanent support SSRs, I feel. Next we have our Event SR, Meguru. The happiest Meguru. Event Meguru is a bit of an odd card this time around, emphasizing attacking with 2 stats and then link appealing into the 3rd. Her buffing power only comes from her memory appeal, which is relatively weak. Maybe this card is teasing some future content in regards to the Fess animation? Guess we'll have to see. As long as you play the event at least a little, you'll get this card. I don't think she's necessarily a card to write home about, but at the very least, maxing out this card will unlock the costume combination for all your other Meguru cards. Her roles are Dual Attacker and Buffer. For Meguru's abilities, her initial skill is a Visual 1.5 Appeal, as well as a Vocal 0.5 Appeal that links into a Dance 1.5 Appeal. At max, she has a Vocal 2.0 Appeal alongside a Dance 1.0 Appeal that links into a Visual 1.5 Appeal. At 1 star, she gains a Vocal 12% up if your mental is 74% or lower, 40% chance to activate once. Her 2-star passive is a Vocal 30% up if the turn count is 3 or less, 40% chance to activate once. And her memory appeal at max is a Vocal 50% buff for 4 turns that links into a Dance 1.5 appeal. You can see what I mean about this card being a little strange to build. For recommended supports, of course we have the core, but we also feature a variety of all stats. Meguru wants a balance of all 3 stats, so take your best supports of each stat line and try your best to flesh out the build. Because of her vocal focus passives, adding a slight emphasis on vocal might be a good call, depending on your team situation. We do not have a team composition for her. As a center, she gets a C. No thanks. As a unit, C-. I think the original Event Meguru is debatably stronger than this card, which is very surprising and maybe unfortunate. Again, I would say worry enough about the event to max her out, then enjoy using this outfit on other Meguru cards. It is pretty cute. Next we have our rerun card, starting with ChiuKi. One of the more gimmicky but useful event supports, ChiuKi with her photo shoot masteries pairs up well with Dance Amana and Vocal Tenka supports, creating a real sense of synergy for TFD photo shoot runs. While the card combination isn't as strong as many of the other ideal support setups, this is a great budget option card for players looking to get started with TFD and to make the most of the game mode. Her unique abilities are Photo Mastery Visual and Photo Mastery Mental. Visual reaching +12 and Mental reaching +5. And her TFD idea is Visual. For the rest of ChiuKi's abilities, at 1 star she unlocks a Visual 18% buff if you're in the visual position, 30% chance to activate once. Her 2-star passive is a Visual 35% up if the turn count is 8 or later, 30% chance to activate once. Her uncap is a Visual +50, and her 4-star appeal is a Visual 2.0 that reduces the judge's interest by 20% for 1 turn. She gets somewhere between a C+ and a B-. She is mostly good if you plan on leveling her to 80 ASAP and applying Photoshoot EX skills so that she'll show up there more often. Otherwise, she's a mostly average event SSR with an extremely slow passive even for stalling standards. You'll still have to run her if you want Visual Austro Unit Mastery, but... I don't know. It's kind of your only real option, and otherwise the card is okay. Definitely worth considering getting at least a couple copies, or just max her out since the event isn't necessarily too difficult. Lastly, we have Kaho. When this card first released, we were originally very confused as to why this card functioned like it did. We had already gotten an event SSR Kaho who was also visual focused, and this card didn't seem too useful for those who had already maxed the SSR. She's a budget option of a budget option for aspiring visual teams. Her abilities are Idol's Bond, Visual Mastery Visual, which I forgot to highlight, but it is worth noting it reaches +7, Promise Recovery, as well as Rest Boost, and her TFD idea is Appeal. For Kaho's abilities, at 1 star, she has the Visual Position buff of 12%, 30% chance to activate 1 time. Her 2-star passive is a Visual 30% buff as well as Defense Reduction of 30%, as long as the turn counts 3 or earlier, 30% chance to activate once. Her 3-star is a Visual 50 uncap, and her 4-star appeal is a Visual 3.0 that increases your attention by 40% for 2 turns, and reduces your defense by 40% for 2 turns. She gets a B+. She's actually reasonably okay in most regards for visual teams. Acceptable passives, surprisingly strong 4-star appeal to inherit, and her masteries will work well enough if you're planning on building a visual team. For sure an appreciated pickup if you either just started Shiny or missed out on the event last year. And that's the end of the video. Thanks so much as always for watching. Next time we'll be coming back to talk about the limited banner as we move into the month of April that will include Asahi 2 as well as a limited support May. So I'm looking forward to seeing how those cards pan out, and I hope you are too. So, until next time, I've been Cho, thanks for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your day.